Hello and a warm welcome, everybody. This is Sarah. I'm just going to give it 1 minute for everyone to sign in. Hopefully you can hear me. If you would, or if you can, would you just pop a yes into the chat box, please? Because that will help me just to know that you can all hear me okay. Okay, good. Well, I'm pleased. Looks like you can. So I'm just going to give it 1 minute while everybody gets in, and then I will make a start. There are quite a lot of people. We've got a good number that have signed up for the webinar today, so we just need to make sure everyone's let in okay. So I'm going to make a start because we have got a lot of content to work through today. And thank you for joining me. This is about unlocking the secrets on how to export and import successfully. So just to start off with, who am I? So an introduction to me. I have worked in international trade for over 37 years. I started my career in manufacturing. I worked mainly in the export departments of the companies that I worked for. And the last company that I worked for, I actually was responsible for shipping explosives. They were marine distress signals and pyrotechnics for the military. So if you're ever going to be involved in anything, to give you, as I term it, the baptism of fire, it's shipping Class 1 explosives that required military export licenses. And I was responsible for the Middle East. Of all the areas they could have given me, it was the Middle East, which also involved complicated letters of credit, and also a lot of consular documents for the Arab British Chamber of Commerce. So it really did give me a good grounding on possibly like the worst commodity, but also one of the hardest regions of the world to export to. And I have to say, one thing that I really enjoyed about my time in manufacturing was the interaction with international clients, and I decided that I would absolutely love to work in sales. So at the time it was newspapers, and I applied for every sales job that was in the newspaper, and it didn't matter what it was. I just thought I'm just going to go out there and see where it takes me. And where it took me was actually to Southampton. A freight forwarder offered me a full-time sales role. So I sort of fell into freight forwarding, I guess, because it was all about the sales job at the time. And I have to say, I've then spent the rest of my time in the logistics industry, and I absolutely love what I do. I've got some great training along the way. At the time when I first started, worked for a number of freight forwarders, large, medium, and small. And that gave me the opportunity just to see how different it was in different companies and how differently they did things. And also that I traveled extensively overseas. And for any of you who are also involved in international travel, you'll know how when you go to different countries, just how different everything is. And that was a real eye-opener for me over the years around how differently other countries move their goods, and in comparison with what we do here. So, that's been great exposure. And I got to a point where I was head of sales. I had 10 salespeople working for me, a team of admin people. And I got to a point where I just thought, well, you know what, if I'm going to work this hard, I'm going to work this hard for myself. So 23 years ago, I set up Risa, my own freight forwarding company. And again, I love what I do. Along the way, we've also set up a training and consultancy part of the business. And that's very much come from avoidable mistakes that we see on a daily basis, moving our clients' goods around the world. The mistakes that impact on your profit, cause delays, and often conflict and upset customers, where if you'd just known these little things that you need to know, it would have made all of the difference. So the presentation that I'm doing today is actually from this Logistics Mastery series of workshops that I run, and it is very much about this roadmap to profitable global trade. And they are there, the 10 topics that we've sort of identified and split down. And whether you're new to this, you're only in maybe a junior role or just taken over a role, or whether you're a seasoned exporter, importer, I do go into great depth, but I also do some real fundamental stuff where you need to start with this. So it does cover pretty much everything that you need to know. And the workshops themselves, the way we term it is, if you don't have a dedicated logistics person or team, or you've inherited this particular role to get your exports and the documentation prepared to get them wherever, or indeed if it's an import to bring them in from wherever, if it's a bolt onto your job and it's something that you've inherited, it's not something that you're properly trained in, or you find that you're muddling your way through this and often just looking back at, well, what did we do last time? And we'll copy that. Well, of course, that's fine, so long as what you did last time was correct, but also to consider as well the fact that has it changed since you did it last time? Because if there's one thing that I've learned as the years go on, that since 2020, this last 4 years, the change that has undergone around global trade, how we do it, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had so many things that have gone on that have affected global trade. You need to be up to date. And even we at times, because you can imagine, even we're bombarded by customs, by the Department of Business and Trade, so many different things coming into us for us trying to keep on top of it. So we understand how difficult it is when it's just a little bit of your job role and what you're doing. And again, it's filling that gap, that lack of knowledge gap, and it's the how are you going to get it right? And again, you'll see my focus is very much on profit in everything that we do. And it's so that you make that profit that you expected. You streamline your systems and processes to make it easier to do what you need to do, to optimize those opportunities that are presented to you and you're able to find overseas, to have happy repeat clients. Because of course, when you've spent so much time developing a relationship, you don't want something to happen that affects that relationship and you've got an upset client. And of course, also, there's great satisfaction in outcompeting your competitors, and the way I always say as well, and leaving them standing. So this first slide here is very much around Export Excellent, which is the second workshop that we do. And again, this is something I've looked at this, and I'm going to give you an example of something as we go along, just so that you can see where quite easily mistakes can be made. So again, when you're looking at pricing, I put at the top again, profit. It's all about the profit that you're going to make. And as part of that, making sure that you've allowed for whatever costs there are to make it, or if it's a service, if you're providing. Also thinking about, okay, what's the cost of the packaging, the labeling? Have you had something designed because it's a new product? Are you going to put that cost of that design, of that initial product that as it's being sold, is that going to be proportioned against the selling price? You've got your transport, your logistics, customs clearance. In some countries, it is a standalone brokerage type facility where it can't be a freight forwarder that does it. It's a separate entity. So again, there may be more costs involved in that. And specialist documentation. When I spoke a few moments ago about the Middle East, that's somewhere where the likelihood of having certificates of origin that maybe need to be legalized and certified by the Arab British Chamber of Commerce in London. These sort of documents, you're talking often hundreds of pounds to have those go through those procedures. So again, it's understanding what are those extra costs going to involve. Duties and taxes. And remember, our export is someone else's import. So it's understanding as well. It's not just the taxes that maybe we're paying here. It's also any overseas duties and taxes that would be applicable. Trade remedies, they are often increasing the cost of something. Quotas are often reducing the cost of something. And well, one of the slides I'm going to talk about is GSPs. And there is a whole section of this within the workshops where I will look at trade remedies and how it could impact you with extra costs, but actually how you could also look at quotas if your goods qualify and how you could take advantage of reduced rates or zero rates of duty. Insurance while the goods are moving, so the transit insurance, and also a liability insurance as well. Also direct office costs. Have you employed somebody in either a sales role, an admin role, a VA? Again, are you going to apportion costs for that within your sales price? Commissions. Your salesperson is most likely to be on some sort of commission structure, or have you appointed an overseas agent or distributor where again there's going to be payments made to them for the work that they do in selling your goods overseas. Looking at advertising, marketing, there's costs there that if you've incurred those as part of the sale, are you going to put those in it as well? Then the cost of money and credit. Have you financed the deal somehow? Where's the money come from and has it cost you money? Are you going to factor that in? And exchange rate risk. Again, looking at how the US dollar is a good example. Most shipping costs are priced in US dollars, and many of the invoices that we see that are dealt with, going all over the world are actually in US dollars as well. So that's currency exchange risk is something to certainly be considering. Now, the example I'm going to give on this one is of a client that actually they came to us at the very start and said, look, we're having some real problems with HMRC. They won't leave us alone. So when we got talking to them, they manufacture named products, generally for children. So as the children go back in September and they've all got water bottles, it's the bottles that have got David, Joanne, Cameron, whatever on them for the children. So every year they launch a new range of products, and they're manufactured in China. And as part of that, they have to have molds and tooling made so that all of these different water bottles, for example, can be produced. Now, this tooling and the molds run into tens of thousands of US dollars. And if any of you are involved with anything like that, where you've had this one-off cost involved in the manufacture of something, that when you import those goods into this country, or indeed when you export them and you're going to charge your client for that you've had to have made, that should be included in the first either export or import of those goods within the customs entry. Because if you don't, if you are inspected by HMRC, and they will pick up on it because they will look at the documents for a transaction from the very start to the very end, and they will see that you have paid an amount of money for this, or your customer's paying you an amount of money for this. And then, you'll be fined basically, and they can go back 6 years through your orders, and they can charge you the money that you should have paid in duty and VAT, and also fine you for not declaring it. So something as simple as that, which was a genuine mistake, has been very costly. And also the fact that they came to us in the start and said, can you help us, was because every year HMRC went back and did an audit on them. And that's time consuming from staff point of view, but that loss of production time and everything else, why they've got a team of people in from HMRC going through their records. Now, also within workshop number 2, we look at the paperwork side of what's required for exports. And I've included ATA carnets within this because carnets seem to be something that is quite misunderstood around when they should and they shouldn't be used. Now, they are issued by a Chamber of Commerce, and it might be that you need to speak to your local Chamber of Commerce, who will then send you on to the local one that actually deals with this. For example, here in Lincolnshire, there's Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce, but actually it's the East Midlands Chamber of Commerce that you need to go to if you want a carnet issued. So it's more of a regional chamber that does it. And they will provide this, and it's a simplified means to move your goods, to get them out of a country and into another country, or to cross, let's say it was going to the EU, to cross borders of a number of countries if they were going to, I don't know, let's say Poland or Spain, and there's going to be multiple countries involved. So it enables those goods to transit through all of those countries as well. And it is that temporary export of something that is, the intention is that you are going to re-import it back here into the United Kingdom, but it doesn't require you to do a full export and import customs clearance. The reason for this is these goods remain yours. You're not selling them. You're taking them, for example, to an exhibition. You're taking commercial samples somewhere to show to a prospective client or clients. Or maybe one of your engineers is going somewhere to repair a machine or to install a machine, and they are either carrying those tools and equipment with them as hand baggage, or it might be that you're sending them with a freight forwarder to wherever so that he can meet them at the company, and the goods will be there waiting for him, the tools and equipment. Usually, the Chamber of Commerce will ask you to make a security deposit, an amount of money that would be the amount that would be applicable in duties and taxes if you were to sell them to that country. And the idea behind that is to make sure that they do come back and that carnet is surrendered back to the Chamber of Commerce. At the minute, it's still a paper version, and as it crosses each border, as the document crosses each border, it gets stamped to say that it's entered a country and then stamped as it leaves that country. It is going to be digital, but in speaking with customs just recently, they did say that they are some way off getting to a full digital barcoded system. Now, if the goods are sold or disposed of during their journey, then the duty and taxes become payable in whatever country that they last arrived in. So it is important that really it's a good idea not to sell them, quite frankly, and to have them come back. But if something happens, then that's what you'll be responsible for, paying that duty and taxes in the country where they last arrived. But on their return, as is the intention with this, as they come back, or everything goes, the documents go to the issuing Chamber of Commerce and your security deposit will be refunded. Now, a lot of people don't understand about carnets and the importance of them. And we had a business contact us recently because they had a machine, there's only one in the world, and this machine was stuck at a hotel in Germany. And they contacted us to see if we could help to get this machine back. When we looked at it, what they should have done, that there was an exhibition at this hotel, and that's what they'd sent the machine for. Rather than sending it on a carnet, they actually sent it with a courier operator who imported the goods. What they did, they Googled the head office for the hotel chain that they were going to, got their VAT number, and they imported it in the name of the company, of the hotel company of the head office. So they were then pursuing that hotel head office for the duty and VAT that was payable. But of course, I mean, it was nothing to do with them. So they had that issue going on. But also, of course, when it came, the exhibition was over and they needed to return the goods to the UK, the head office chain for the hotel wouldn't cooperate with the UK company to get them back because, as they quite rightly pointed out, they were never the importer. It had all been done completely wrong and they weren't prepared to get involved in it. We weren't able to help because really the courier operator that did it, it was their responsibility to sort it out. And the last time that I spoke to this business, they still hadn't got the machine back. So it's really important, make sure you do this right or your goods could get caught up and you're in a real situation. Right, so workshop number 3, we look at import insights. And this is a slide from that presentation where we're looking at preferential trade agreements. And GSPs enable goods that are manufactured in certain countries around the world to be imported into the United Kingdom at reduced rates or nil rate of duty. Now, the idea of preferential trade agreements is to help developing countries trade with businesses in countries like ours. And there's around 70 of these countries, a lot in Africa and South Asia. But what, a lot of people say, well, yeah, but what we're going to buy from Ethiopia or Haiti or wherever. But when you look at that list, you've got India in there, and India manufacture a lot of high-end machinery, industrial machinery. We import a lot from India. Most of what is imported with us comes in under GSPs. You've got Indonesia, you've got Vietnam. Again, we do a lot with Asia as well. And Vietnam, you'd be surprised how much comes out of these countries. Sri Lanka. So don't just automatically assume that these countries that you're dealing with, you could potentially have the use of a GSP, which would give you a competitive advantage if you've got other competitors here in the UK that maybe don't know about these things, and you could get them in at either a reduced or a nil rate of duty. You will need proof of this at the time of import. Normally that would be as a certificate of origin, which is the GSP Form A. Sometimes an invoice declaration will be sufficient. For example, India, they work on a REX, an REX, it's a registered export system. And that REX code we put in on the customs entry, and that enables our clients to gain preferential rates of duty on those imports. So this is somewhere where, again, we talk about this and we look at various avenues where there could be the opportunity to reduced or nil rates of duty on goods that you're bringing in. Incoterms. Right, Incoterms are, I think, one of the most misunderstood part of international trade. And the number of times we see businesses make mistakes with these, because whoever's negotiated the contracts, whether it be purchasing and they're buying goods, or someone in the sales team for exports. The graphic that I've put up here shows you all of the current ones. Incoterms generally are reissued every 10 years. So at the minute we're working to the 2020 Incoterms. And the idea behind the updating them every 10 years is so because trade changes. So they may change the terms, they may remove one, they may make changes to one, they may call it something different, but they do review them to see how trade has changed over that 10-year period. And as you can see, that responsibility between the seller and buyer, as it moves across, you can see how it changes as to who's responsible. If you look at that and imagine the EXW, the X works is the start of a journey, and the DDP is the end of a journey. So there's all those points in between where you could agree that they're the terms, they're the Incoterms that you're going to either sell or buy on. There is something else that we look at during this particular workshop, and that is I talk around different regions of the world and the best Incoterms to buy and sell on. There's a separate one for export and a separate one for import, because there are certain parts of the world where you really wouldn't want to be responsible for the local charges once they arrive at the main international port or airport. Africa is one of those countries. South Africa, that fair enough, that's very well developed, but there's a lot of countries within Africa that once it gets to that main airport or port, you will struggle to find a freight forwarder who will be happy to then take it on to the final destination of where your client wants it delivered. Even full containers, a lot of the shipping lines are very reluctant to allow their containers to go in to certain regions and certain parts of Africa, because anyone that's traveled in Africa will know that a lot of those containers end up as homes for people. So knowing what to sell by region is also a big advantage. So I'm going to look at two of the terms on Incoterms, because there's two that we see that are regularly incorrectly used. Now, X works is one of them, and there's this big question as to whether X works should even be used for international trade, and actually, is it a domestic term, domestic being here within the United Kingdom? It's a complicated one as well, because it brings in elements of customs, commercial, and VAT law. The seller makes the goods available for collection by the buyer, their customer, and delivery as such is completed without transport. So that's why the argument for it being domestic, that's where that comes from. You as the seller effectively the exporter, because the goods are being exported, you lose control at the point at which the collection vehicle leaves your premises. Now, the question here is, how do you know that your goods are being exported? And if you have a VAT inspection and you have issued an export invoice, which would have no VAT on it because it is being used for export, if you can't prove that your goods left this country, then the VAT will be payable. That 20% VAT will be payable to the VAT man, basically. So, and I'll show you the document in a minute that you need to be able to prove that. So certainly the viewpoint on this is, don't use Ex Works, because you don't have the control, you lose that control, and you don't necessarily get the evidence that those goods have been exported. Remember, the freight forwarder that's contacted you to collect those goods isn't working for you, they're working for your customer. And therefore, their commitment to giving you what you need to prove that it's left this country may not be all that it should be. So in terms of the Incoterms that you should look at, I would suggest free carrier. And again, people will say to me, yeah, but Sarah, that means we've got to deliver it to the freight forwarder's premises that's going to be moving it for the rest of the journey. Well, it's actually, you don't have to, because you can have a free carrier your premises. So if you're in Sittingbourne in Kent, it can be free carrier Sittingbourne in Kent. So that vehicle will still come to you and they will pick up from your premises, but you are responsible for the export customs clearance. And that's the key here. You are the exporter, you are shown on it as the exporter, and you are admittedly paying for it, which, I don't know, let's say you're going to be charged somewhere around 45 to 55 pounds. That's a much better deal than to find out that you've got to pay 20% VAT because you can't prove that those goods left the country. And this is the document. This one is from Chief. Many of you will know that we're switching over to the CDS system, the Customs Declaration Service. Chief is being mothballed after many, many years. The document is still an S8. You'll see at the top left-hand side, it says Chief DTI/S8. And at the bottom left of this document, you can see it says goods departed on 21st of July, 2023. That is the document that the VAT people will be looking for as proof that your goods left this country. And if you're an exporter and you are moving multiple goods, orders a week, somebody needs to be responsible for ensuring that you get all of these departed notices, the S8s, from whoever's moving those goods, because that should be part of your due diligence process for ensuring that you've got everything on file that you need for the completion of that order. Now, delivered duty paid. This Incoterm is the most complex of all of the Incoterms, and I actually wasn't going to include it within this presentation. However, I've had 2 companies contact me this week where someone within their commercial team has negotiated on DDP terms. The machines are now ready to move, and they've suddenly realised that this isn't going to be as straightforward as they thought it would. So I've put this in because it's a real awareness exercise around this and the complexity in which you will find yourself. The EU in particular When we were in the EU, of course, the goods, once they were imported into the UK or once you had made them, they were automatically within free circulation here and within the EU if you sold your goods there. But now, and there was no duty or VAT to pay, that's free circulation, there was no duty or VAT to pay. So now we're in a situation where if you export to the EU, we are classed now as a third country. So your client is now responsible for paying duty if the goods aren't of GB or EU origin, and the one-time movement rule within the free trade agreement that we have with the EU hasn't been used up. Now, one of the workshops I do also covers off rules of origin. I haven't included it today because, again, it's another real complex one. But to come back to DDP, so the UK exporter is responsible for the import customs formalities in the country that they're going to. So in this case, if you were exporting to Italy, let's say, and it requires the import entry in Italy requires the importer of record, the declarant, they have to be established in Italy. And to be established, you either have a fiscal representative, you have to have an established office that's trading, employing people, issuing financial accounts. You cannot just have a PO box number, or to move goods in transit to the final destination. Now, transit is a special customs procedure. This is something else that I do cover off in one of the workshops. We look at, I call it customs magic, and it's all around different procedures that can be used to delay, defer the payment of duty. But you need one of those three for you to import those goods, for example, into Italy. If you don't, then you've got a real problem. And any storage or demurrage costs as they arrive, and you're trying to work out what you're going to do and how are you going to get your name on as the declarant onto that import customs clearance in Italy, then all of those storage and demurrage costs will come back to you, because at DDP, your client has no responsibility for anything. Everything is down to you. So to give you some solutions to this, DAP, delivered at place, or carriage paid to, CPT, are better alternatives. It does mean that your customer in Europe or around the world, wherever they are, will need to arrange the import customs clearance, but they're established in that market, so they can be the declarant, and that's the difference here. So they are better terms to use. But we have found EU companies very much wanting DDP terms, and sadly, GB exporters getting caught up by this. And just to give you, I'm going to give you an idea of the complexity. This was something that we helped a business with. They came to us. This was a contract that was negotiated prior to us leaving the EU, but it was a long-term contract, and they were about to supply the next part of the contract since we left. So we've got a company in the UK that's selling to an Italian buyer. They are supplying and making some of the parts, but they've also subcontracted to an Italian subcontractor to manufacture the big framework for the machine that's being made. So you've got multiple parties involved in this. And the complexity to do this involved, there's a customs regime, which is 42, which allowed them to bring the parts from GB to the EU, and they customs cleared them and were brought into free circulation in France. So they were able to then supply them to the subcontractor in Italy. It involved them setting up a power of attorney with a customs agent in France to do that part of it. Then a fiscal mandate had to be set up with, I mentioned about a representative. This is a tax accountant. They had to set up a tax accountant to register for VAT and the intrastat within Italy for the declaration around the VAT that would be incurred. They also needed an EU EORI, which is an Economic Operators Registration Identification Number. They had to apply for one of those. And it involved their client in Italy also signing paperwork and understanding around how the VAT could be shown within their purchase records. The only saving grace for this company was the goods that parts they had made here in the UK were classed as GB origin, and the framework for the machine that the subcontractor in Italy was making, that was EU origin. So it didn't bring in duty problems around them. But even that, I mean, that would have been the next level forward on it as well. But you can just see that how complex this move was, and the costs that were involved with this were significant. And of course, it's on a case-by-case basis. You can't just say, oh, it's going to be, I don't know, £10,000 or something like that. It really does. It depends on the amount of money that's being outlaid by the tax accountant, you know, whatever it is. It is very complex. So please, please, please do be careful of DDP. Now, I've included this slide around the Red Sea crisis. It's actually to do with insurance is where I'm going on this, but I wanted to make you aware of, again, this is something else. I talked earlier about the fact of just how difficult the last 4 years have been and indeed continue to be. And this is all around what's been going on since last November. And it's the Houthi rebels, and they are attacking ships within the Red Sea. And as you can see from the graphic on this slide, normally the route would be going through the Suez Canal and the blue route on there. But because of the attacks to the vessels, they are now, the majority of them are now going round South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. It's adding at least another 10 days, often more, because it's another 10,500 nautical miles. It's causing problems with the supply chain and distribution, where it's taking months. Certainly during COVID, the average was about 4 months to get vessels back on their normal scheduled times. That's the impact that it has. The figures that are being given, it costs about another £2.3 million per trip for these vessels to take that extra longer route around Africa. And it's, you know, how it's affecting pricing, oil pricing, and everything else. So, you know, again, do think about this in terms of, first off, ocean freight. We're seeing now where there were weekly services to certain countries, even including America. Some of the shipping lines have now gone to twice weekly for exports from the UK. What they'll tend to do is often, like this graphic shows, they'll go to mainland Europe because they can offload more containers there, maybe Rotterdam, for example, and then they'll use what's called a feeder vessel to bring them over to the UK because there's less containers coming off here than there would be in mainland Europe. So there's a lot of chaos and uncertainty around what's going on in ocean freight. From an insurance point of view, I want to stress how important it is that, first off, you insure your cargo, but secondly, those of you who actually are actively doing that you make sure with your insurers that you are covered if one of these vessels gets hit, catches fire, you know, whatever it is, that are your goods covered? It is so, so important. Because from an insurance perspective, I dedicate a whole workshop to this. And this is my can't park there, mate. And again, the Ever Given, there'll be very few of you that will not know the story of the Ever Given and how she became stuck and blocked the Suez Canal. Now, she's one of the biggest vessels in the world, and she carries, well, either if you either think of it as a 20-foot or a 40-foot container, 20,000 20-foot containers or 10,000 40-foot containers. And you can see from that shot, those stacks, those container stacks are all equal. She's full. And how much, I don't actually know the value of all of the cargo that was on that vessel, but it's going to be massive. And she caused one of the largest traffic jams in shipping history and major distribution to the international supply chain. And she actually arrived 4 months late into Felixstowe. Now, from an insurance perspective, you're thinking, okay, yes, the goods were late. But there's more to it than that. So many businesses take the view that, well, actually, we don't insure our cargo. We take the view that if we insured every order that we send out and everything that we buy in, every import that we buy in, we're going to end up paying X per year. Well, we don't have that many claims. So actually, we might as well take one hit on a major claim and just offset it against that 1 year rather than paying out all of these insurance premiums. Well, personally, I don't agree with that. I think if I was shipping my goods around the world, they would be properly insured for their value. But one thing you're not considering, you're only thinking about your goods in this scenario. If they get lost, if they get damaged, if a vessel catches fire, whatever it is. But what will you do if, as with the Ever Given, it goes to general average? Now, this isn't uncommon that vessels go to general average. And it requires anybody who has cargo, so the goods on a vessel, to contribute to any loss or repair, for example, to that vessel, even if your cargo isn't damaged. So, and general average claims, I mean, I've put there, they're financially threatening for the cargo owner. And if you have not got insurance cover, you cannot give the required financial guarantees to the ship owner or the average loss adjuster. And, they may well be looking for millions of pounds overall over the vessel. If you have insurance, as the cargo owners, your insurance will cover you, and your insurers will give those guarantees to the ship owner or the average loss adjuster, and they will release your cargo to you. If you haven't, your goods will not be released to you. So everyone on the Ever Given was responsible, proportionally liable for the losses incurred for that salvage operation from the Suez Canal. Now, the Suez Canal Authority filed a claim for $916 million for the losses that they were caused to them as part of the Ever Given being grounded in the canal. So, don't just think of insurance as, if my goods get lost or damaged. There's a lot more to this. And that is why I cover insurance off as a topic all on its own. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions. If you have, I didn't mention this earlier. I guess I should have mentioned it earlier. If you have, please put them into the chat box, and I will have a look at that in a few minutes. But look, for any of you, if anyone is interested in the Logistics Mastery workshops, I've put there some information that it's 10 weeks. They they're starting again. My next series that I'm running starts on the 3rd of May. And I mean, you can see we cover off everything. In week 1, looking at the freight forwarding fundamentals. We look at even going down to freight forwarders, and I talk about different freight forwarders. You know, when you're thinking, okay, we've got this to export, who are we going to use? And I give some proper help and guidance. I know we're freight forwarders, but I'd like anyone that has attended them would turn around and say, yeah, you know what, I was very neutral and I was very honest around the things that you should consider when you're picking and looking at freight forwarders. I look at calculating the freight costs as part of that first workshop, because often freight forwarders will quote like a shopping list of different charges. And again, it's important that you understand how those are applied to the weight and cube of your orders that you're moving. And I explain and I talk through that so that you can better pick that out. And again, don't make those mistakes where you work the price out and it actually turns out it's twice what you thought it was going to be. Then the export excellence, again, you've seen a couple of examples of things within this. The import insights, I look at landed costs as part of that, how you calculate your duty, VAT, and again, GSP valuations on the import side. Incoterms, I do go into it in a lot more depth and help you with regions of the world, as I've talked about, and yeah, just understanding which are the best terms to use. We're looking at customs codes and tariffs. I do a real deep dive into certain tariff headings. We look in the tariff, we look at all the boxes, what everything means, so that you can actually take a view on something if you're importing it or exporting it. Are there things, do you need an export license? Is there a GSP that you could take advantage of from an import to get a lower rate of duty? Just what all of these different codes mean and where you need to go to find out about it. Rules of origin, the free trade agreements. We had free trade agreements with the EU. Our government have gone out and they've renegotiated many of them, and there are some really good ones. And again, we look at some of the free trade agreements that have been negotiated and potential areas where you could look. New Zealand being one of them, and that's quite an interesting one. Then customs magic. This is a more advanced one. It's looking at inward processing relief, outward processing relief, return goods relief, certain customs procedures that you can apply for so that you can reduce or eliminate duty from your transactions. Insurance, you know already, I've explained that one. And then looking at sort of like cargo management within procedures within your business, packaging, and just general safe journeys. Right, so normally I charge $597 plus VAT. For anyone that's interested, there is the barcode there. There is also the sign up page within the chat box. I am doing a promotion. Anybody that follows the link or the, it's not a barcode, is it? It's a, I can't remember what it's called. Put LM200 in and you'll get it for $397 plus VAT. So, you know, I mean, for 10 hours of really good quality information, honestly, you will learn so much. It's worth every penny. Series starts on the 3rd of May. I do give a guarantee. If you genuinely, I'll let you attend all of the workshops. If you don't feel you've got £397 worth of value, all I say is, please be honest and just tell me why didn't you think it was valuable to you? And, you know, if I will then give you, no quibbles, your $397 plus VAT back. A special bonus from me, the first 5 people who sign up, you can have 2 hours of my time. I'm happy to sit down with you and we can look at anything that you want me to look at, any challenges, anything that within your business around the logistics side that hopefully I can be of great value to. You will all receive an email, and within that, the how to complete your export document will be part of that email. So you haven't got to download it from anything today, but everyone that's attending will get that. Just to say, if you're not able to attend any of the workshops, I will send you a recording from it. We'll know everybody who attends each time, and say you will get a recording, so you will not miss anything. So there's the Eventbrite link there as well, but I say it is in the chat. There is the code thingy, which I can't remember the name of, at the bottom of your screens as well. And let me just look in the chat. No one's asked anything, but if anybody does want to put anything in, please do. If you've got any questions, please feel free to do so. I'll answer it now, or if I can't answer it for some reason, I will come back to you. But please do ask. Other than that, I realise everybody's busy. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you've got some value from today, and it would be great if you're able to join me on my next series. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.